an introduction. And as I said to some people today, quite often we don't understand properly what does it mean to live together in a retreat or have some lectures. It is not the same. Quite often we do lectures during the retreat. Very seldom retreat during the lectures. But it happens that during the retreat we expect to acquire knowledge. During the retreat we should not expect to acquire knowledge. We should receive some inspiration to think, reflect, and pray. A retreat is never done in a group. You do this yourself. The group can help you when they share, when we stay together, when we pray together. But during the retreat, it is you and him. So, this is why I will rather do this our meeting in a very spiritual way rather than academical. As I said yesterday, the papers are ready and the presentation is ready. You can receive that maybe tomorrow night all together, and you can read that. And they are written in a very academical style. This, what I'm doing now, it is rather sharing. I feel very secure and safe in your midst. So I don't even complain and apologize about my English. I hope you understand. Okay, at the moment our congregation is blessed with 20 people on the altars. 19 Redemptorists and 1 nun. It makes 20. I said this to some people to John during our afternoon walk. I get really angry when I see the way we describe the life of those people. When I read the biographies, even of our founder, there's only one founder, and some people help him. You know, sometimes we describe their life as if they were from the moon, as if they were not born of a woman, as if they were not grew up in a simple environment or poor environment. You know, we like to make them more holy than they were. And this spoils. At the moment, we do not have a good biography of any of our saints. Even St. Alphonsus, if you want to understand him, you have to read at least 3 of them to have a full image. No? Because we tend to glorify them too much. It happened that the beatification of St. Gerard was postponed purposely. So he will not be beatified before St. Alphonsus is canonized. You know, sometimes we do this, no? And now I will share with you a story that happened to our Father General Joseph Tobin, who is from this province, no? Of Denver. He went to Marianella in Naples, to the place where St. Alphonsus was born. In the chapel, which is close to the house, there are 2 altars. One is dedicated to St. Alphonsus, and the other one to St. Gerard, of course. Yeah. And there was a Neapolitan gentleman leading him, guiding him through the corridors, speaking, of course, in the Neapolitan dialect. And to his astonishment, General see, there are flowers on St. Gerard's altars, and there is even not one flower on St. Alphonsus' altar. And he asked the gentleman, how is? Well, what is all this about? Why there are flowers only on one altar and not on the other? And the gentleman answers like this. Father General, you should to know that this guy, he was writing the books, but that guy, he was doing miracles. This is how people understand the saints. You know, and if you go to Naples, they know who was the Alphonsus de Liguori, but they like St. Gerard. It is like this, no? So with the saints, you have to really enter into their life. No, that's the first step we have to understand. The second one. Would you like to go to heaven? Who does not want to go to heaven? Raise the hand. All right, you don't want to go to heaven. I presume everybody wants to go to heaven. Okay, now, if you want to go to heaven, as children say, to see God and to go to heaven, we all have to be saints. Today, we will speak or we will see the faces of those who were beatified and canonized. What does it mean? They do not belong anymore to our congregation. They belong to the whole church. They were beatified and canonized because they can be of an example to the whole church. I think we have more than 20 saints in the history of the Redemptorists. Yeah? But we have only 20 beatified and canonized. And we have to understand it properly. They belong to the church, and their life were examined. And they can be of an example to every disciple of Jesus. That's why we venerate them on the altars. Mm-hmm. This is the way we have to understand. Now I will show you the faces of our saints and blessed. Try to look at them and think and reflect. And ask yourself a question. Which of them you like the most? And why? Which of them you like the most? And why you like that particular saint? Okay? But before we go through this collection of saints, we have to understand that who is the most important. It's all because of him. It's all because of him. And because of her. Now, Alfonso Maria de Liguori. I think I don't have to introduce this gentleman. Our founder. Watch him and think. Gerard Magella, a very short description of his life. Only 10 lines, and you can close a saint's life. But we know that it is something more. This guy was Redemptorist only 6 years and a half. Clement Hochbauer. The one who moved our congregation beyond the Alps, to the northern of Europe, to my country, then to Austria, and then to all the world. John Neumann, even though Americans prefer to say Newman, which is very, very wrong. It is
not according to Carl Vogel.
Yeah.
Paul will insist that in his own lifetime it was pronounced.
I know other Americans who share my opinion.
Yes.
It is a translation. Neumann, Newman. It is exact translation. I always like to tease people. What about him? The only American bishop saint up to this time. There's no other bishop saint in the United States. Only one, Redemptorist. A foreigner.
And he's the only male saint.
Gennaro Sarnelli, who was, or maybe not, a Redemptorist. Peter Donders, to be exact, we should say Pirke Donders. And here we enter into a certain characteristic with our saints. All the saints after Saint Clement became saints with the immigrants. We have to remember that our congregation developed together with the flow of the immigrants from Europe. We went with the people to share their life. They became saints, living country and security, and they were going with them. 3 of them, Donders, Zelos, and Neumann, decided to leave Europe, never came back to Europe and stayed in those countries. 2 of them in America, 1 in Suriname, Dutch India, Batavia. Very simple man. Gaspar Stangazing. Since I was a student, a Redemptorist student, I loved his saying. Why he became saint, I don't know. He was a helper of a prefect at the seminary. Nothing special happened in his life. He was living in Berchtesgaden, in the German Bavaria, and he was just a good priest and good animator of the students. To be a saint, you just have to fulfill the will of God for you. Francis Xavier, Zelos. What about him? You know him very well. A fascinating story. I hope he will be our next saint. And these 5 people, now another characteristic and feature of our saints and blessed, we have more martyrs than normal saints. What does it mean? This is the characteristic of our time. We need people who can testify to the very end and pay the highest price. These people, if you read their lives, the names you know, I have here because just to pronounce them properly. Blessed Methodius Dominic Trčka, beaten in the prison because he sang a carol. This gentleman. He was a priest of the Roman Rite, and then he became a priest of the Byzantine Rite. The next one, Nikolai Czarnecki. 2 saints visited the Grota of Skala. One was Redemptorist, Nikolai Czarnecki, and the Second one was Maximilian Kolbe, a Polish Franciscan. This gentleman here, Wasyl Weliczkowski. This one here, Blessed Ivan Ziatek. And the last one, Blessed Zinowi Kowalik, crucified on the wall on a Good Friday in a Soviet prison. They had the courage to oppose to the arrogance of those who wanted to eliminate God from man's heart. Nothing special, just singing carols and saying Jesus is alive. And these people, I like this image. This painting was used at the gratification and painted by a girl from Cuenca, and expresses those 6 people who became martyrs in the civil war in Spain in the 30s. They wanted to stay there with the people. They could run away. Actually, they hide in the houses, but they were taken from the houses and executed on the cemetery. So now, you can think for a while, a minute or two. Which of them is your saint, and why? The embarrassment of choice, no? But it is good to have your saint from this big collection. Everything started in that year, when the Redemptorists were, you remember this year, no?
The rule.
Our rule was approved, and with that we received another gift, a saint. In that year, Redemptorists were preaching a mission in Muro Carmo, small city in southern Italy. And you know the story. After the mission, Gerard decides to join Redemptorists. But there's one particular. 2 people were writing letters in that time. One was Gerard. He leaves a letter for his mom. Forgive me, mother. I am going to become a saint. Okay. He is accepted by the 2 missionaries who preached the mission. And they sent him to the Richeto with a letter. We sent you an unuseful brother. Useless brother. Useless brother. In the very same night and day, 2 letters. One, forgive me, mother. I go to become a saint. And the other one, we send you a useless brother. This useless brother is the best known Redemptorist in the world, who was Redemptorist only 6 years and a half, if you can see the dates. Interesting story. But how we approach that story, especially of Saint Gerard, and any saint, how we understand spirituality of those saints. It is an intimate secret, human and spiritual, how somebody become become saint. We try to examine. We try to inquire. We try to analyze. We use our mind. But we also have to use our heart. If we want to learn from them, it is not enough to fill our head with the dates and knowledge and just play with them that he was born, he died, he studied, he joined. This is very easy. You press Mr. Google and you have all of this. No problem. You know where is the longest road in the world, no? This is the longest road. Very few manage to run that road fully. Very few in life. We belong to the society and to the culture of a reason today. One of the last articles and writings of Benedict was the danger of reason in our society today. And I think we have to remember that. When we approach a saint, we have to analyze. We have to examine. But we have to use our head and our heart and involve our emotions. Don't be afraid to do that. This is why you have to pick up your saint and you have to know why. Why I like him, why I like her. You have to examine the facts, documentation, letters, writings, so-called fonts. But then you will have difficulties. Like, for example, with Saint Gerard. So many legends grew up along that time. That he was doing that and this and that and this. These are difficulties. It is not important that we know the legends. It is important that we know his heart and his mind. And the reason why he was like he was. Sometimes those legends, sweet stories, they can obscure and they can even present a saint totally out of his time. And this is the danger of writing a biography too sweet and not true. You know, saints come from human beings, from body and flesh. And we have to present them like this and make them attractive like this, because this is the true story about them. We don't have to present them innocent or too holy, because it is not our merit that they are holy. And don't be afraid. If God wanted them to be example to the whole church, He will manage. He will manage. We don't have to, You know what happened with Costa Rosa, no? This crazy nun, as she was defined, even the sisters gave up hope that she will be beatified. And it happened like this. In 1 year, out of the sudden, we found the miracle and everything went smoothly. Because the cause was of the Redemptorists, not of the sisters. We ran the cause of the beatification of Blessed Maria Costa Rosa. So, God has His times. Then, from knowledge, we have to arrive to spirituality. What does it mean? Be like him, be like her, but in my time. We don't have to photocopy. It is impossible. And one more thing that we have to remember. Redemptorist spirituality is more than Alphonsian spirituality. This is crucially important. Spirituality of St. Alphonsus is very different of that of Peter Donders. And that of Peter Donders is very different of that of Ukrainian martyrs. And that of Ukrainian martyrs is very different of that of Gaspar Stangazing. Very different. We have to understand that. And if we are blessed with new, blessed and saints, it means that our congregation deserves that today. It is a gift. It is very, very important that we realize that we have now martyrs, as I said before. So, St. Gerard's spirituality can be summarized in these 5 statements. He was a young Redemptorist, always united to his beloved God, who had a great love for neighbor, for everybody, who was full of frank and serene freedom. Why? Why? Because he wanted to do and to fulfill God's will. This was the only reason. In one of his letters, he writes this. Oh, remember that he was not a stupid boy or uneducated boy. If you read his letters, and if you see the style of his writing, beautiful. His calligraphy is beautiful. He wrote more letters than Sarnelli, than Donders, Stangazinger, and the rest. He was a spiritual director of many nuns, and he had a special contact with Blessed Mary Crostaros. He was a young Redemptorist, and as I said before, he spent in our congregation only 6 years and a half. Most of the time in the Liceto. This is why you have to come to Italy and make the course to know those places. If I say the Liceto to most of you, I don't say anything. No? You have to go there and see and touch the place. He died in Mater Domini only, he was there only a couple of months, and he died there. But he was a Redemptorist who wanted to dedicate his life to Jesus, totally. Jesus was the center of his life. No, none of it. And he writes it in his letters. In one of the letters he writes, he says, it is a powerful statement. He says, I want to dedicate myself totally to love of God and the neighbor. And if I meet anybody who will obstacle this, I will correct him, or I will argue with him. I will argue with him, even if it was the Rector Mario. So St. Alphonsus. No? Always united to his beloved God. He was dedicated to God and to other people. We do not have any pictures of his life. But if you go to southern Italy and if you ask about St. Gerard, everybody knows who is St. Gerard. Everybody. Everybody. And if you go to Mater Domini and see on the map the places he has visited, walking, it is amazing how many people he knew, how many people he helped, how many people he was in touch with. Really and truly. Love for one's neighbor. His option for the poor was a fruit of his own experience. He comes from a very poor family. He knew what does it mean to be a poor. Then, he had a great respect for the poor people. He sees in them the image of Jesus. And this is the most important thing in his spirituality. His spirituality is centered on Christology. Jesus is the center of his life. Now, this gave him a tremendous freedom. He was perhaps one of the most free Redemptorists that we know. Even in the light of the famous calumny. You know the issue, no? He was accused of something he didn't do. And you know what he does? He is called to go to Pagani and explain himself to St. Alphonsus. He is a brother, remember that. And Alphonsus says, so, do you want to tell me something? Because they accuse you of very, very, very serious stuff. And he was silent. St. Alphonsus sends him to Chorani and to Naples and forbids him to receive Holy Communion. This was very big penalty for Gerard. When he couldn't receive Holy Communion, he said, please do not send me for the Mass to the church, because I will take away the host from the altar. Don't do this. You know, at the very end, the calumny is dismissed, no? And Alphonsus calls him again and says, why you didn't say anything? Why you didn't say anything? And he indicates the famous picture, the rule. Now, sometimes we say, all right, he wanted to be humble. He has the rule said that only priests were obliged to follow that regulation, to be silent in the face of the accusation, not the brothers. He could easily explain himself, but he says, as a brother, I am equal to you, Alphonsus. Yeah. The rule applies also to me, even though I am the brother. So it is not about humility. It is about courage. So whenever you see him, going through Naples like this, and we present him as a very simple, almost uneducated brother. Nothing like that. And more we know about him, more we know that we were mistaken for a long time about him. Why? Because of those legends, which were unrealistic. I hope that one day we will find somebody who will write a proper biography of his life. Proper. Yes.
You.
And we know the moment of his death, no? This is a very moving story, which starts when he was a child. When he was a child, in his city, there was a custom of the living Passion Play. It is still in Italy, they do this, during the Holy Week, they do. Latin America is famous for that, no? They imitate Jesus and the Station of the Cross alive. And Gerard wanted to be Jesus. And he played so well when he was crucified that, his mother went down, because she fainted, because she was convinced that he died. This is important. Now, when he is in Mater Domini, dying of tuberculosis. This is a dreadful story. He was left alone. The conquerors were pushing like this a ball with the foot into his room because they were afraid. And what he wrote on the wall? This is the place where the will of God is done. How he wants and as long as he wants. There was a brother assisting him in the very last hours of his life. And when he was about to die, the brother thought, I will go down to the refectory and I will bring him some water. In that while, Gerard dies, alone, just like Jesus. The passion play was fulfilled. So this was his life. This presentation will be in 5 stages. The first one we will just skip it because it is obvious. You can read his life easily, and I don't have to use this time for this. You know that he comes from which country? Where he was born. You men, where he was born. Czechoslovakia, Bohemia. He was born in the same country as John Neumann, yes. Mm-hmm. So, we can divide his life in 5 stages. Or 4. The years preceding his entry into the congregation, and you know, he wanted to become a priest, but he couldn't afford it. Many times he tried to be an eremit. He does pilgrimages to Rome 3 times. Finally, he decides to be an eremit close to Rome, in Tivoli, Quintiliano, and it is there that he assumes the name Clement, because his baptismal name is John. So he becomes Clement when he was experiencing this solitary life? Solitary life, no?
It's hermit.
Yes, her hermetical life. Yes. Then, in 1784, more or less, he enters the congregation. And here we have to clarify one of the myths. Yes, there is one legend which says that together with his companion Tadeusz Hebel, he enters to Rome and says, wherever we hear the first bell, we join. This is... I will not say. This is not true. Why it is not true? Because the newest inquiry says he gets to know Alphonsus while he is studying in Vienna. The books of Alphonsus are already known, no? And he, through the means of one of the theologians from northern Italy, acquires knowledge about Redemptorists. So now we are almost convinced that he knows where he goes. He knows that he wants to be a Redemptorist. It is a silly legend to say, okay, I will go wherever the bell rings and I will join and dedicate my life. You know, these kind of legends, they disform these people like saints. So he knows where he goes. He's accepted, and he does his formation in 1 year and a couple of months in Frosinone. The whole formation. Novitiate, he takes vows, he fulfills his studies, he's ordained deacon and priest in Frosinone in 1 year. It is possible, and he's a saint. Perhaps we should change our formation system. Less studies, more experience. I don't know. Anyway, and then it is very easy to understand his life. He is sent for a short time to Vienna, then to Northern Europe. Because of the winter, because of some difficulties, he stops in Warsaw. Since he was speaking German fluently, and there was a need for a German priest, for German people living in Warsaw, he receives the church, and this binds him to Warsaw. He is living there for 20 years. After that, by the order of the Napoleon, he is being sent out of Warsaw to Vienna, when he lives more or less 11 years. That's his life. Now, Who can read that? And you can read that.
Sure, I can.
That's a very short description of Clement's personality, and I like it. Missionary voice.
Oh, missionary, okay. Clement sometimes was narrow in his judgment through his personal. Oh, wait, I can't read that. Oh, so his pastoral approach was future oriented. He was, according to our terms, conservative. Clement was aware of his limitations. He thanked God for his mistakes, and he said, "Otherwise, I would be tempted to
kiss my own friend out of sheer regard.
He
He is capable of great joy, but also subject to sadness and dejection. At the death of his friend Hubel, he writes to the Vicar General of Poor in Switzerland, "I'm a poor poodle, and therefore still very awkward in my office. It is God's will that I am placed over others, I who should be receiving direction from others. The death of my first traveling companion northwards, Father Hubel, has put me somewhat out of sorts. That is why I write so rarely. While one is meditating on the feet of the crucified, one seems ready for everything. But as soon as the Lord wishes to lay his cross on us, we are hardly in a fit state to carry it. That's the kind of old donkey that I am." The following traits were blended together in this man, as if in a mold: the practical craftsman and the missionary filled with the Holy Spirit, the hermit and the wandering apostle, the friend to the poor, and the dinner companion of the aristocracy, deep cordiality and active work, the love of this world and the longing for the next.
Okay. And I will just characterize this paragraph. Hope, power, and the congregation. We can identify some pressures that he felt within himself from different angles. The first one, it is within the congregation. It wasn't easy for him to be in the congregation. As we know, he never saw and met personally St. Alphonsus, even though St. Alphonsus knew that 2 Germans, as Napolitan said, arrived to the congregation. We have to remember that the part of Naples in that time were suppressed. This is why St. Clement goes to Frosinone, to the Roman part of the congregation, the only official part of the congregation. And Alphonsus says this: "Yes, I heard about the 2 Germans who joined the congregation. They will bring a lot of good to the congregation, but they will have to work differently." This is important. You know, Clement is being sent over the Alps, and then he becomes the Vicar General of the congregation. But he experienced many difficulties and tensions. As long as the general is Father de Paula, another guy who should be beatified and canonized, I think he should be, but the relationship is good. But when the Neapolitan part of the congregation returns to be official, we have another general of the name Blasucci, and the problems start. Clement is being accused that he is not following the rule. He does not do missions. He does not follow the rule. In one of the letters, Clement explains that we do not preach the missions because the territory we are living is under the occupation. In the 20 years of his stay in Warsaw, Warsaw was taken by French, Prussians, and Russians. So it was impossible to preach the missions. Then he says, you have to understand that the style of life here is different. If we would go to bed in the afternoon like you do, following siesta, people would be scandalized. You cannot go to bed even for half an hour because they will be scandalized. The life here is different. And what he does, he opens schools. He opens orphanages. He does mission in the church. And this is when and how the idea of the perpetual mission starts in Warsaw when he was living there. But he had to deal with many, many tensions. You have to understand that when Alphonsus was beatified, they didn't inform him. It was a big pain to him. He was not informed of the beatification of the founder. He writes that in the letter. So the letter, it took a while for a letter to arrive from Naples to Warsaw and from Warsaw to Naples. So there were many tensions and many difficulties within the congregation for him. Then he had to deal with the holy man of a name Joseph Passera. Joseph Passera, he was a holy man, and perhaps he will be beatified and canonized. I see him like this. He could be a holy man in any congregation. Not necessarily in the Redemptorists. Wherever congregation, he would be holy, because he has this kind of approach. It is from him that the western part of Europe assumes this monastic way of living. Now, he expands the congregation, but he gives to the congregation this monastic color. Okay? But it wasn't easy. They were fighting in Warsaw. The brother Kunzman, who arrived with Clement and Hebel to Warsaw, gave to Clement a very hard time, to the point that he left Warsaw. He went back to Naples complaining about Clement, that he was too strong with the conquerors. So it wasn't easy. But Clement, he had a very strong temper. So many times he was leaving community, returning, and like this. The tensions from the conference, I just said, with some people. Political circumstances. Warsaw in that time was under 3 occupations. And it was in a very bad state, morally and politically. And what Clement did in Warsaw, it is a miracle. This is why he is called in my country the Apostle of Warsaw. Now he has a monument in the middle of Warsaw. He is recognized as someone very important to our country. Even though he never, this is my opinion, he never acquired a Polish physiognomy. He was German. He was German, and we have to. Recently, I have translated all the letters to Polish, his letters to Polish, and I realized that from the letters that he was till the very end of his life rather German than Polish. Yeah, this is yeah. And the last characteristic, if you know his life, failure after failure, he wants to establish new communities in Romania, in Germany, in many countries. He manages only to establish one community in Switzerland. Then he goes to Vienna, and he discovers that this is not the way. He has to form new people for new times. And this is why he starts to work with the academical people, with aristocracy and other people. Just to finish, the differences between him and Alphonsus, which are very important. Alphonsus comes from the noble family. Clement from very poor family. Alphonsus writes many books. Clement only a few letters. Alphonsus radiates only in the kingdom of Naples. Clement has as his home half of Europe. Alphonsus chooses the most abandoned, never returns to Naples, to his palace, prefers life in Chorani and small villages. Clement, even though he was simple, uneducated, he was in touch with Nuncius, the Pope, and other people. these are the differences. Where are the common points? Both of them dedicated themselves totally to God and put at the center of their life Jesus and Mary. They loved the congregation till the very end, and we should really know their lives, because if some people say that Sarnelli deserves the name of the co-founder, some other people say that Clement deserves that name too. Yeah, because really he deserves that.
Here in North America, he's often called the second founder.
Yeah. So some spiritual themes we can identify in his spirituality, and I will finish. Faith, the will of God, the confidence in God, prayer, devotion to Mary, virtues, and the last one I like the most, the mystic of action. Now, if you like, at the very end, some questions you can take into consideration. What should it mean to us to live in a congregation which has an apostle of such a stature as a member? The second question: what does Clement say to us about love for the congregation? Love for the congregation, about faithfulness to the tradition, and about innovation. Don't burn the past, but be creative for the future. And the last comment: St. Clement is a historical character, man who made history and now belongs to history, and therefore to the past. Certainly, saints have their place in history, but they have also cast their light into the present and point towards the future. Clement is an encouragement for us to meet the world of today and tomorrow bravely and humbly, and he did as he did in his time. Forgive me that I was too long. Thank you very much.
Thank you.